Good morning, people. Today we're in our gourmet kitchen. We're going to do a demo about gessoing panels. We get a lot of questions about how do you gesso your panels. And I will say that there are really good quality, commercially available ones, lots of them. And one that comes to mind that I've used, I hardly have used them because I make my own. But Da Vinci panels have a nice absorbency. They're just right, not too absorbent, and I'll talk about that. And there's Raymar has quite a selection, and I imagine there are quite a few others that I'm not really familiar with. This is a piece of masonite, 1/8 inch, untempered, very important. I have sanded it so that masonite arrives from the factory really slick, and it's not very absorbent. And so by sanding it, you give just a little bit of a braid it, just a little tooth, so that the gesso has a better chance of adhering. Other products such as MDF, medium density fiberboard, they're more absorbent, and you really don't even have to pre-sand those. And one of my favorite materials is Baltic birch plywood. It's a cabinet quality plywood that you can get from particular hardwood and lumber supply companies. And the way I do it, I'm not sure if our material suppliers are going to like it, but a product that I've been using for some years is called Zinsser 123. It's a house paint primer. And it's really the same thing. It's an acrylic polymer primer, but it's formulated to seal. It's a stain blocker. And I'll get to it eventually, but sandable hard gesso is not a stain blocker. So that's why we need both. Because tannic acids from the wood. So the reason for using two different products, this is a stain blocker. Acids and so forth will, over many, many years, maybe even not within our lifetimes, but eventually acids can work their way up through the primer and into the paint. So this will prevent that from happening. So what I do is I'll stick a drywall tool into the paint, to the paint bucket, and put it on with as little texture as possible, because that's just my personal painting preference. Other artists want a lot of texture, but as for me, I like to make my own texture of where it's needed, and I will do that with oil paint. This is going pretty poorly, so I will put a little bit of water on this foam brush.
It usually goes on a little smoother.
It does, and so what I would need to do is, and I do oftentimes, is put a little, just about maybe a 1/4 inch of water into the paint, and stir it up with a high-speed drill and a paint stirring tool. It really doesn't matter how you get this on here, but we just want it consistent.
And Dan usually does 4x8 sheets at a time, and then cuts them after, so you get a lot of bang for your buck there.
Yes, it's a production.
It is.
When I do that, and that way you have panels for the next year or longer.
And if you do it that way, leave some of your sheet big, because don't cut it all at first, because you don't always know what size panel you might want for a particular project.
That's right. You may have a frame around the house that needs a painting. And so you can cut it to that size. So this is the basics. It's going to require more than one coat. The second coat will be just like the first coat. It's just like house painting. It is house painting. You don't try to get too thick at any given coat. And this is advice I've been given by professional house painters, is that just get a thin coat at first, and the second coat goes quite a lot easier, which is related to sealing that I talked about in an earlier episode of our channel about glazing. This is also a type of sealing. Okay, so we're gonna let this dry, and then probably the next day, depending on air temperature, let it dry overnight and paint it again. The exact same process. Phase 2. Let's assume that we have a panel with this under primer already on it. And so here it is. What we're going to do is I'm going to put on a coat of, well, I'll talk about two different types of gesso. First, there's this regular gesso, and then there's sandable hard gesso. The regular gesso is, it's probably a pretty good sealer. I think that Golden is a really reliable company. They do have high principles manufacturing. You apply sandable hard gesso or regular gesso the same way. It has to be over a sealed surface. The difference is sandable gesso will sand to a fine powder. And what's more important than that to me is the fact that it provides just the right absorbency for painting out on location. Because I do what is called selective toning with transparent areas, with thin, almost like watercolor areas of the paint. Well, it needs to set up really quickly so it can go over it with a subsequent oil paint. And so it does set up quickly with the sandable. Less quickly, quite a bit more slowly with the regular gesso. For studio painting, this is what I prefer, is the regular gesso. They're both applied the same way. Actually, I will put on a coat of sandable because this is a size panel that I'm most likely to use on location.
So you're using one or the other. You're not doing a coat of both?
One or the other, yes. And that's, in both cases, it's really important that as I keep repeating, that the panel is properly sealed first. So here, I'm going to dip into regular sandable hard gesso, it's called. I do kind of like this texture. Is it visible? Can you make it out? No. Maybe from this, well, I'll show it from another angle. Now, the attempt is to get this as smooth as possible. It was kind of a rough undercoat, so it may take numerous coats of gesso to get this really built out as smoothly as I want it. I think that's working, so I'm gonna... This drywall tool, which is a valuable $1 tool, it leaves just a little bit of a weave, but it's really subtle. And to me, that is a really nice texture to work on. So I'm going to walk around, Jen, if you pan to show. So this is a texture I would like to paint on. It's not too rough, but it's got a little tooth to it. And then if I want additional texture, I can add it with oil paint. So when that gesso has been dry for a couple of days, it will be dry enough to sand. And I'll sand it just lightly to give it just even a little more smoothness and a bit more absorbency. And that absorbency is most needed for pieces that are going to be done in a short time, say on location.
Because the absorbency helps the paint to dry faster.
It does, or it does. It sets up faster, mysteriously to me. I don't know the physics of it, but and on hot days it sets up really fast, and it may not even be needed. I mean, the absorbent gesso, but oftentimes we're out painting when it's kind of cool, and it makes a huge difference in the time it takes for the selective toning to set up. And it does need to set up so you can paint over it, because if you ever try to paint over a really wet turpentine wash, it's kind of hopeless, because you're just slipping and sliding and have no control. Okay.